Good afternoon. Today I ordered our armed forces to strike at terrorist-related facilities in Afghanistan and Sudan because of the imminent threat they presented to our national security. I want to speak with you about the objective of this action and why it was necessary. Our target was terror. Our mission was clear: to strike at the network of radical groups affiliated with and funded by Osama Bin Laden, perhaps the preeminent organizer and financier of international terrorism in the world today. The groups associated with him come from diverse places but share a hatred for democracy, a fanatical glorification of violence, and a horrible distortion of their religion to justify the murder of innocents. They have made the United States their adversary precisely because of what we stand for and what we stand against. A few months ago, and again this week, Bin Laden publicly vowed to wage a terrorist war against America, saying, and I quote, "We do not differentiate between those dressed in military uniforms and civilians. They're all targets. Their mission is murder, and their history is bloody." In recent years, they killed American, Belgian, and Pakistani peacekeepers in Somalia. They plotted to assassinate the President of Egypt and the Pope. They planned to bomb 6 United States 747s over the Pacific. They bombed the Egyptian embassy in Pakistan. They gunned down German tourists in Egypt. The most recent terrorist events are fresh in our memory. 2 weeks ago, 12 Americans and nearly 300 Kenyans and Tanzanians lost their lives, and another 5,000 were wounded when our embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam were bombed. There is convincing information from our intelligence community that the Bin Laden terrorist network was responsible for these bombings. Based on this information, we have high confidence that these bombings were planned, financed, and carried out by the organization Bin Laden leads. America has battled terrorism for many years. Where possible, we've used law enforcement and diplomatic tools to wage the fight. The long arm of American law has reached out around the world and brought to trial those guilty of attacks in New York, in Virginia, and in the Pacific. We have quietly disrupted terrorist groups and foiled their plots. We have isolated countries that practice terrorism. We've worked to build an international coalition against terror. But there have been and will be times when law enforcement and diplomatic tools are simply not enough, when our very national security is challenged, and when we must take extraordinary steps to protect the safety of our citizens. With compelling evidence that the Bin Laden network of terrorist groups was planning to mount further attacks against Americans and other freedom-loving people, I decided America must act. And so this morning, based on the unanimous recommendation of my national security team, I ordered our armed forces to take action to counter an immediate threat from the Bin Laden network. Earlier today, the United States carried out simultaneous strikes against terrorist facilities and infrastructure in Afghanistan. Our forces targeted one of the most active terrorist bases in the world. It contained key elements of the Bin Laden network's infrastructure and has served as a training camp for literally thousands of terrorists from around the globe. We have reason to believe that a gathering of key terrorist leaders was to take place there today, thus underscoring the urgency of our actions.
Autumn 1992, Jamal al Fadl, an Al Qaeda financial agent, is sent from Bin Laden's headquarters in Sudan to Zagreb, Croatia, to gather information about the Bosnian War and the prospects of buying businesses in Croatia for Al Qaeda. In Croatia, he meets with Inam Aranut, who will soon become the head of the Benevolence International Foundation in the United States, and Al Qaeda operatives Abu Abdel Aziz Barbaros and Abu Zubair al-Madani, one of Bin Laden's cousins. Barbaros tells al Fadl that Al Qaeda is seeking to create training camps in Bosnia, develop relationships with Bosnian charities, and established businesses to help finance Al Qaeda activities. He says that the BIF is providing money for Al Qaeda to buy weapons to use in Bosnia, and that they are already having obtained some weapons from Germany with the help of the BIF and Mohammed Loe Bayazid. According to a later Justice Department indictment, Barbaros also says that Al Qaeda's goal in Bosnia is to establish a base for operations in Europe against Al Qaeda's true enemy, the United States. Around this time, the BIF begins providing food, clothing, money, and communications equipment to fighters in Bosnia, including the elite Black Swans unit. Jamal al Fadl was previously recruited by the Afghan Mujahideen through the Al Farouk Mosque in Brooklyn. Presumably, when he was in the United States in the mid-1980s, after he became a senior employee of Al Qaeda. He would attend meetings on August 11th and August 20th, 1988, with Osama Bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Mohammed Atef, Mamdouh Mahmoud Salim, Wael Hamza Juluddin, and Mohammed Leo Bayazid to discuss the foundations of Al Qaeda. In Khartoum, Sudan, he traveled to Hilat Koko with Mamdouh Mahmoud Salim in late 1993 and met with Amin Abdul Maruf to discuss chemical weapons. In the autumn of 1992, Fadl traveled to Vienna and had meetings with the Third World Relief Agency, which has its headquarters in Vienna. He opens up a Vienna bank account, and Al Qaeda operative Wadi al-Hajj also opens up a Vienna bank account around this time. Presumably, these accounts are used by Al Qaeda to send money to the Third World Relief Agency for operations in Bosnia. At around the same time, Al Qaeda leader Mamdouh Mahmoud Salim would tell Al Fadl that Al Qaeda's goal is to make Bosnia a base for European operations. The Third World Relief Agency will funnel hundreds of millions of dollars into Bosnia for illegal weapons purchases over the next several years, while the United States watches but fails to act. However, things would suddenly change for Al Fadl, for he was a gregarious man and a man who has a penchant for gambling. After embezzling $110,000 from Al Qaeda, Al Fadl, worried that bin Laden would have him killed, defected. He contacted the CIA via the United States Eritrean embassy and received encouragement from FBI agents Jack Clunan and Dan Coleman, who were seconded to the CIA's bin Laden unit from New York, where he returned to the United States in spring of 1996. While in protective custody, Al Fadl won a modest sum in scratch tickets in the New Jersey lottery, which was taken away by his guards. For the next 3 years, Jack Clunan and his colleagues oversaw Al Fadl in a safe house, and from December 1996, Al Fadl began to provide a major breakthrough of intelligence on the creation, character, direction, and intentions of Al Qaeda. At first, he was distrusted, for nobody knew anything about Al Qaeda. Not the FBI, at least. However, the CIA would know far more than their counterparts in the FBI. But between June of 1996 to April of 1997, Al Fadl would tell the United States investigators everything he would know about Al Qaeda. Before Al Fadl's debriefings, U.S. intelligence had amassed thick files on bin Laden and his associates and contacts. The CIA would never share them with anyone. However, They had no idea how the many pieces would fit together, but an official would later say that Al Fadl gave us everything which fell into place. The New Yorker will later call Al Fadl arguably the United States' most valuable informant in Al Qaeda. FBI agent Dan Coleman will later say about Al Fadl, he's been very, very important to us. When it comes to understanding Al Qaeda, he's the Rosetta Stone. FBI agent Mike Antisev will similarly say, he spoke to us in great detail, and everything that he told us panned out. CIA officials debrief Al Qaeda for a month and a half. Then the CIA hands him and transcripts of all their interviews with him over to the FBI. Coleman and U.S. prosecutor Patrick Fitzgerald interrogate Al Fadl at a U.S. military base in Germany for months. Roughly between November of 96 and April 97, Al Fadl tells the FBI about the historical background of Al Qaeda, in which Al Fadl was one of Al Qaeda's founding members, the structure of Al Qaeda and its leadership composition, Al Qaeda's objectives and direction, its financial infrastructure and networks, and the extensive knowledge Al Fadl had of that because he worked as an Al Qaeda financial officer, its connections and collaboration with other terrorist groups and supporters like the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and Abu Sayyaf, its activities against U.S. soldiers in Somalia, its activities in Bosnia, the Al-Khifa Refugee Center, and bin Laden's efforts to acquire weapons of mass destruction, in which Al Fadl was personally involved in an effort to buy uranium for Al Qaeda in late 1993. And lastly, bin Laden's plans to attack either inside the United States or U.S. embassies. Al Fadl continues to help U.S. intelligence until current day. For instance, in 2000, he will help U.S. officials capture his brother-in-law, Mohammed Suleiman al-Nalif, who is said to be close to Ayman al-Zawahiri. Al-Nalif will eventually be sentenced to 10 years in prison in the United States. Al Fadl will have no knowledge of the 9/11 plot, but he will continue to identify captured Al Qaeda operatives after 9/11. Interestingly, Al Fadl will later claim that he worked with the Sudanese intelligence agency with the direct approval of bin Laden. Al Fadl will later reveal in early 2001 court testimony that in the early 1990s, bin Laden grew concerned about the perception of religious legitimacy of Al Qaeda action. In 1992 and 1993, bin Laden formed a fatwa committee made up of Al Qaeda's more religious leaders to provide a fatwa for Al Qaeda's methods. A fatwa is a religious sanction. The committee issues a secret fatwa following Al Qaeda to work to evict the U.S. military from the Arabian Peninsula. Al Fadl claims that one of the key members of this fatwa committee is Abu Qatada. In the early 1990s, Abu Qatada is little known, but he moved to Britain in 1994 and gained asylum there and began to gain a public reputation as a radical Islamist preacher. Interestingly, around the same time, the U.S. learns this information from Al Fadl. British intelligence begins using Abu Qatada as an informant between June of 96 and February 1997. In late 1996, according to the New Yorker, 2 years before the U.S. Embassy bombings in East Africa, Al Fadl had warned U.S. officials that bin Laden's followers may try to attack U.S. embassies abroad or targets inside America. He would also reveal that Al Qaeda maintains an important cell in Nairobi, Kenya. And Al Fadl gives the names of many of the operatives, including Wadi al-Hajj, the head of the Nairobi cell. Fadl defected in 1996. However, he would have an early trial in 2001 and will roughly repeat the warning he gave, saying that maybe Al Qaeda will try to do something inside the United States. And they tried to fight the United States Army outside. And also, they tried to make bomb against some embassy outside. In August of 98, 2 U.S. embassy bombings will be bombed in Africa. Even with the intelligence services being informed about Al Qaeda's wish to attack U.S. embassies, which included Al Fadl's testimony to investigators 2 years prior. In 1998, the FBI begins an investigation into the Illinois-based Benevolence International Foundation by chance. A Chicago FBI agent is attending a conference in Washington, D.C., and learns of foreign intelligence reports that the BIF executive director, Inam Aranout, was involved in providing logistical support for radical militants. The agent's name was Robert Wright Jr. It is not clear why the FBI office in Chicago was not already informed about the BIF and Aranout, given what the United States intelligence already knows by this time. Beginning in 1993, the FBI was continually monitoring an Al Qaeda cell in Florida that sends money to militants overseas using BIF bank accounts, and one of the cell members filed BIF's incorporation papers. The FBI interviewed one of the cell members, Adham Amin Hassoun, and asked him about BIF and Aranout. BIF founder Adel Baderjee was listed on the incorporation papers. It is also reported in The Guardian, a British newspaper tabloid, and other newspapers in 1993 that the BIF was shut down in Saudi Arabia when closing a charity was a highly unusual move for that country. The Guardian also says that BIF founder Baderjee was a known political activist and had been detained. Media reports also link him to assisting Saudi fighters in the Bosnian War. In 1994, Mohammed Lau Bayazid, president of the BIF at the time, was arrested in the United States with Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, Bin Laden's brother-in-law, and another of Bin Laden's brothers. Khalifa was quickly linked to the Bosnia-Bojinka plot and many other Al Qaeda ties and plots, including Bosnia and the Philippines. Yet all three were let go, and Bayad continued to work at BIF until 1998. Bayazid was one of Al Qaeda's founding members. In early 1996, a secret CIA report suggested that Aranout was involved in the kidnapping and murder of a small group of Western tourists in Kashmir, including Americans. The report also links BIF to other military charity fronts and extremists, including the commander of a training camp in Afghanistan. On February 20th, 2001, Al Fadl testified in a trial, the United States versus Osama Bin Laden. The trial began in New York City of 4 men accused of the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in East Africa. The U.S. also wanted to prosecute Osama bin Laden in his absence under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, otherwise known as RICO. To be able to do so under American law, the prosecutors needed evidence of a criminal organization. Al Fadl was taken on as a key prosecuting witness who, along with a number of other sources, claimed that Osama bin Laden was the leader of a large international terrorist organization called Al Qaeda. In giving testimony, Jamal al Fadl described a 1992 fatwa issued by Abu Hajir al-Iraqi, otherwise known as Mamdouh Mahmoud Salim, at the request of Al Qaeda leadership that was punitively based on an earlier fatwa by an influential 14th century Salaf scholar, Ibn Taymiyyah, permitting the killing of Muslim supporters of the Tartars, the Mongols, who threatened to invade the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt. The fatwa have been described as a pivotal development in that it provided Al Qaeda with justification for the killing of Muslim civilians and bystanders. Patrick Fitzgerald, prosecutor, would question, "Can you tell us now what Abu Hajir al-Iraqi said about Ibn Taymiyyah?" Jamal al Fadl would reply, "He said that our time now is similar like in that time. And he say, Ibn al-Taymiyyah, when a Tartar came to Arabic war, Arabic countries that time, he say, some Muslims, they helped them. And he says, Ibn al-Taymiyyah, he make a fatwa. He said anybody around the Tartar, he buy something from them and he sell them something, you should kill him. And also, if when you attack the Tartar, if anybody around them, anything, or he's not military or that, if you kill him, you don't have to worry about that. If he's a good person, he go to paradise. And if he's a bad person, he go to hell." Patrick Fitzgerald, who would later become well known for serving as the special prosecutor who investigated the Bush presidency leak of the identity of CIA agent Valerie Plame, played a leading role in debriefing Al Fadl. The transcripts from his debriefing ran to 900 pages. And according to the New York Times, the transcripts themselves emerged from a messy process. The videotapes they detail were made by mistake from 2000 to 2002 by federal marshals who had set up the video phone hookup so prosecutors in New York could keep in touch with Mr. Al Fadl. Prosecutors and the FBI had not authorized the taping. And when prosecutors learned of it in 2002, they were shocked, knowing that they would have to share the tapes with defense lawyers who were appealing the embassy bombing's verdict. The New York Times profiled Al Fadl on December 9, 2007. Their review of the transcripts described his anxieties over testifying, the emotional difficulties enforced idleness caused, and the emotional difficulties his entire family faced due to isolation and culture shock. The article would later describe his wife, who didn't speak English, demanding he refuse to testify and demanding to leave him and return to the Sudan. At the current date and time, Al Fadl is still under the Witness Protection Program and is somewhere inside the United States.